Hi guys, welcome to my tank manufacturing plant. Today we are building, surprise surprise, tank, heavy tank. On my channel the last US heavy tank M103. Right after the end of Second World War, on 7 September 1945, during the Allied victory parade in Berlin, British and US generals saw the Soviet monster IS-3 or JS-3 heavy tank. And this was the reason to create their own heavy tanks, British Conqueror and US M103, as a response to new threats. First prototypes of M103 was called T-43. The first T-43 pilot model was completed in November 1951. Some 300 tanks were built between 1953 and 1954, initially designated T-43E1. In April 1956, tank was redesignated as the M103 heavy tank. Of the 300 T-43s built, 80 went to US Army and 220 were accepted by US Marine Corps to be used as infantry support, rebuilt successfully to improved M103A1 and then later M103A2 standards. I'm making M103A1 version of this tank. Started my model as usually with bottom of the hull. The hull has very unusual shape, it was made of welded cold steel plates and partly cast. Glasses and beak elements. The cast beak was 3.9 to 5.1 inches in the thickest. What about suspension and tracks? The M103 has rear drive sprockets, 7 road wheels and 6 heavenly spaced return rollers. The trucks, suspension units, torsion arms, return rollers, idler, drive sprockets were of the standardized type also used by the M48 and M60 tanks. In addition to the torsion arms, shock absorbers with dampers were installed on the first 3 front and 2 rear suspension units. Mount our tracks and the suspension is finished. The engine was a Continental gasoline V12, giving 750 horsepower, coupled with a General Motors CD 850 transmission, with 2 ranges forward and 1 reverse speed gearbox. Top speed was not impressive, barely 21 miles per hour on flat, which fall rapidly cross country, and an equal limited range of 80 miles at best when cruising. In my opinion, such a tiny range is the biggest drawback of this tank. You can forget about deep offensive in enemy territory. But the issue was solved with the adoption of the M60 diesel engine in the 1960s, which increased performances, maximum speed to 23 miles per hour, and most important, increased range, 295 miles. Okay, now this tank can fight, instead of constantly waiting for a fuel tanker. Version with diesel engine was designated M103A2. But I remind you that I am making A1 version with gasoline engine, which you can see on your screen. Engine and transmission was placed at the rear of the tank and separated from each other by this partition with fans. The driver sat in the middle, with a small rounded escape hatch under him and rounded one-piece hatch above him. The batteries, reverse motors, along with generator and accessory box was placed in the middle, behind the driver set. The air conditioning system pipes were located in front of the driver. Driver had access to 2 consoles, one for the basic performances indicator and another for the engine situation. Several shells were also stored in the hull near the driver. making cast nose part with driver hatch and adding 3 vision blocks covering the frontal arc. Elliptical cast hull. It saves weight while being optimized at all angles for maximum slope and effectiveness, saving thickness and therefore weight. Covering the engine compartment with radiator grills and start making the turret. The M103 turret was very large to house the recoil mechanism and absorb its course. 4 members of crew sit in turret, and also it was cast as the M48 and M60 turrets. Armor was quite thick with 9.8 inches on the mantlet, 11 inches on the turret front, 3 inches on the side and 1.5 inches on the top. The commander was in the middle behind the gun with its own rotatable M11 cupola and an adjustable seat which was placed high in the turret bustle. The commander was also responsible for the radio, receiver transmitter and 2 separate receiver housed also in the bustle. He also had his own commands for turret traverse, elevation, depression for the main gun and firing the coaxial or main gun. The gunner seat on the right side of the gun, and also 2 loaders was in the turret. Because look how huge and massive shells the M103 used. For example, this is the shell for modern main battle tank M1 Abrams, with the same caliber of the gun. Now you understand how hard it was for the loaders and how hard it would be for one person to do it. With both loaders, the maximum firing rate of the gun was 5 rounds per minute. The M103 used 120mm M58 gun. Using standard armor-piercing ballistic cap tracer rounds, it was capable of penetrating 221mm of 30° sloped rolled homogeneous armor at 1000 yards and 196mm at 2000 yards. It could also penetrate 124mm 60° sloped rolled homogeneous armor at 1000 yards and 114mm at 2000 yards. The commander could select from 34 rounds of either M358 armor-piercing ballistic cap tracer rounds or M469 heat shells. Secondary armor comprised a twin coaxial mount for caliber 30 M1919 with 5250 rounds in store. Between the commander's cupola and the loader gunner's hatch was a massive M15 rangefinder, protected by armored glass, which protruded. On the roof was commander's cupola, with 3 side vision blocks and 1 periscope, and another single hatch for loaders and gunner. And of course our favorite 50 caliber machine gun, Madus, was on the roof, with 1000 rounds in store. So, what about battle history of M103? Oops, the M103 was never used in combat. In 1956, a pair of T-48 testbeds were shipped to Europe for evaluation and later sent to guard 2 strategic choke points, waiting for the Soviet attack to arrive. By January 1959, 220 vehicles were standardized after modification for the US Marine Corps as the M103A1, and the US Army requested 72 tanks from the US Marine Corps stocks that were sent in Europe. In 1963, they were handed back to the US Marine Corps. After modernization to M103A2 version with diesel engine, they were in service until 1972, when they gradually retired from service. In practice, these were replaced by M60s that have a lighter gun but capable of great range and better performances overall. The M103 was the last American heavy tank in inventory, and 25 are preserved to this day in many locations in USA and a single one at Bovington, United Kingdom. So, I finished my another heavy metal monster. This time it was American tank, next time I think it will be something from Germany, and probably something from the Cold War period too. So guys, thanks for watching, I hope my video was interesting for you, and maybe you learned something new for yourself. Love you guys, love reading your comments, and see you next time.